Story this morning is titled Enemies, and it comes from my colleague, Christopher Weiss. Once there was a little girl who was a queen of an island. One day, an advisor said to her, "Your Majesty, the people on this island are good, but we must beware of the people on the next island, for they are our enemy." "Our enemies?" responded the queen. "How terrible." "Yes, it is terrible," said the advisor, "for our little island will never be safe while we have enemies. We must find a way to get rid of our enemies." "You're quite right," said the queen. "Do you have any ideas?" "I do indeed," said the advisor. "We can take our army, put it on a ship, sail to the other island, then our army can march off and destroy the enemy." The queen was not so sure this was a good idea. "Thank you for sharing your ideas," said the queen, "but I need some more time to think about it. Can you come back tomorrow?" "Yes, Your Majesty," said the advisor, who then bowed and left the room. The next day, when the advisor returned to talk to the queen, he was shocked to find her having tea with the queen of the next island. The advisor turned red with anger. "How can you sit there and drink tea with that person? She is our enemy, and we must get rid of our enemies." The queen looked at her advisor with eyes that were calm and steady. "You have been a good advisor," she said, "and you are right. We do have to get rid of our enemies. You would have me destroy my enemies by conquering them with an army. But the best way to get rid of our enemies is to make them our friends." For our time of meditation and reflection this morning, I'd like to have you participate in a responsive reading with me. After the events of the Pulse nightclub shootings 6 years ago today, one of my colleagues who lived in another state rewrote one of our readings in the hymnal, number 576, titled Litany of Restoration. It evolved over the next few months, and I'd like to have you share it with me this morning. When I do this, your response will be, "It does not matter." Following that, we will go into a period of meditation. If recognizing the interdependence of all life, we strive to build community, the strength we gather will be our salvation. If you live in Lake County and I live in Orlando, it does not. If your skin is black or brown and mine is white, if you are female and I am male, if you are older and I am younger, if you are cisgender and I am transgender, if you are straight and I am queer, if you are Christian and I am Muslim or Jewish or atheist, if you were born here and I am an immigrant, if you are Anglo and I am Latinx, if we join in solidarity with one another, the pain of our aloneness will be lessened, and that does matter. In this spirit, we build community and move toward restoration. Let us take a moment in silence together as we reflect on our efforts to build community and move toward restoration. Amen. Yes, blessed be. May it be so.
Let us remember how we aspire to be by reciting together our congregational covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We do have a proposed new covenant, and we will vote at our annual meeting on our proposed new covenant at the end of the month. It is our practice at UUCLC to give generously to our church as we are able. You may donate in the chat box or on our website, or we have a lockbox out in the narthex that you can deposit your check or money. Thank you very much.
Before I begin my prepared remarks, I want to take a moment to say goodbye for now. I want to just tell you how grateful I am to you and how proud I am of you for all you've managed over the last several years. It's been a lot, a ministerial transition, a pandemic, and you have hung in there, and your teams, your tech team, your worship team, and your building some other people, and your new solar panels. I mean, you've done amazing work in spite of unbelievable odds. And so I really want to commend you for that and express my gratitude. When I stepped down from my position in Orlando just over 3 years ago, you were the first people that I had the opportunity to guest preach for. And I've had counted up 21 times I've been here since then, I think. It's been such a blessing to me to have a meaningful thing to do during this period of time and transition in my own life. I'm sorry we didn't get to do more in person, but grateful that we did get to do some in person. And I wish you all the best as you go forward. I really hope that you will continue to be a beacon of liberal religion here in Lake County. Heavens knows that Florida needs beacons of liberal religion, any place that it can find them. So thank you, and I wish you all the best for now as you go forward. For me, It was exhausting, but never hard. Our mission to preach love and hope in the face of hate and violence is more clear than it has ever been. This was my takeaway 5 years ago as I reflected on the Pulse nightclub shooting the year before. I had hoped, as everyone does after such a tragedy, that it might bring an end to the hate, to the violence. But history continues to unfold, and it is truly exhausting at times. Are we still really debating all the things? That's the hard part, the bewilderment that we can't or won't do the things we can. Yet one thing that I know, our mission to preach love and hope in the face of hate and violence is clear, crystal clear. And not just for us clergy types, for all of us. We cannot let our frustration and fatigue still our voices. We know another way is possible. I have seen it with my own eyes. The events of June 12th, 2016 were a recipe for division. A gay bar, a Latin-themed night, a shooter claiming ties to radical Islam, 49 dead, over 50 wounded. It could have torn Orlando apart, but it did not. We refuse to be divided. We refuse to be divided by sexual orientation, gender identity, ethnicity, or religion. We claimed our common humanity. We refuse to paint any community as evil. We saw that our seemingly diverse communities were not distinct, but overlapped and mingled and merged. We recognize the intersectionality of our lives. This was a blessing in the midst of the unbelievable, but it wasn't a given. Communities can be torn apart by such tragedy. That the Orlando community turned to love and hope was not an accident. It was a choice. One I like to believe that the Unitarian Universalist congregations were part of supporting. First Unitarian Church of Orlando, where I was serving at the time, became an outlying hub of activity. Just 3 miles from Pulse nightclub, we were by 1 p.m. that afternoon providing overflow counseling space for the local LGBTQ center. We were contacted by groups. The Brady Campaign, Equality Florida, and the library and fellowship hall became a community organizing space. For several days, we were abuzz with activity. Much of the planning for the 7,000 person vigil the next evening happened in that space. Volunteers from the congregation, many in their yellow side with love shirts, helped to set up for the vigil. We were quickly found by media outlets. Our staff learned some new skills, managing the press. I was on the radio, interviewed by NPR, BBC, Australia, and more. For me, it was exhausting, but never hard. Our mission to preach love and hope in the face of hate and violence was more clear than it had ever been. 49 dead, 49 lives, over 50 wounded. Lives changed forever. All of our lives changed forever. People stopped by, called to offer help, dropped off donations. We were overflowing with food and water. That which we weren't able to make use of went to the Coalition for the Homeless. We were well fed by local restaurants. There were vigils, so many vigils. Members were part of a counter protest when a hate group tried to disrupt the funerals of some of the victims. Angel wings, which you may have seen, became part of our lives. Unitarian Universalists joined others and reach out and to speak up and to sit in so many ways. The LGBTQ plus community had been targeted. The Latinx community had impacted. The Muslim community was made vulnerable. We did not pit communities against each other. We know that a healthy community supports everyone. Community leaders knew too that they needed help and support. They reached out to each other and to those who have suffered tragedies of their own in other parts of the country. I personally was supported in that time by the Unitarian Universalist Trauma Ministry, who checked in with me daily for the first 3 weeks. Coalitions formed, groups found common purpose. The intersection of oppression became more clearly understood. All of us have multiple identities. How do we honor the whole of who people are? Their gender identity, their sexual orientation, and their race, and their ethnicity, and their immigration status, and their faith, and how do we see each other as whole and beautiful human beings? We began to see each other more clearly, more fully. Now, I don't want to claim that Orlando got everything right. We got a lot right, and we worked to remedy the problems as they emerged. Even in our unity, we were able to acknowledge and wrestle with the cracks that came to light, because they were there. Speaking only for the interfaith community, I can tell you that hearts were searched and changed. People started showing up at LGBTQ events who I would have never expected to be there. I was at times frustrated at all the sudden insight of the newly enlightened, and yet they were there. They were trying. It was progress. It will help. The world watched. Vigils morphed into fundraisers. Artists responded. A community united. And in Orlando, there was life before and life after Pulse. And there is still work to be done. The interesting thing about being close to a big event is that it's hard to remember that not everyone else is having the same experience. So it is deeply confusing that others have not learned the same lessons. That's where I find myself these days. How can it be? How can it be that our state legislators thought it was a good idea to pass a bill that limited the ability of our teachers to support all females? The law, labeled by critics "Don't Say Gay," sends a dangerous message to young children and vulnerable teens. Same-sex marriage has been legally recognized in our state for over 7 years, and the children of those unions are not supposed to talk about their parents in school, and teachers can't mention their spouses by name. This is not just absurd, it is cruel. And our queer and questioning teens, it is potentially lethal. We limit what children can learn about themselves and each other. We limit what they can learn about the rich and complicated history of race in our nation. Why? These things cannot hurt our children. These things will enrich our children. We are limiting the very things that are needed to transform our culture with more equity and inclusion and diversity. And yet, we refuse to limit access to firearms that take the lives of some and traumatize the rest. It is not just absurd, it is cruel. Especially since we know there is another way. Now, I don't think a person needs to be a Unitarian Universalist to imagine another way. But still, let me spend a moment reflecting on how our tradition might inform us at a time like this. And by a time like this, I mean like after Pulse, or when our state government enacts cruel legislation, or when the rash of violence in supermarkets and houses of worship and schools and hospitals seems almost too much to bear. At times like this. Back 6 years ago, our rally cry was, "We are one Orlando. We are Orlando strong." And yet we are left with so many questions. Many we all struggle with still today. Why is there so much suffering of the young, of the innocent? How do we counter the hatred, the fear? We yearn for justice, for accountability, and yet we too often settle for having someone to blame. We want answers. Yet we may not find the answers that we seek. We may be left to live with uncertainty and doubt. My friends, it is better to live with uncertainty, and doubt than to boast false claims of certitude. We say the words, one love, one world, one humanity. One world, one love, one humanity. These are not facts. These are dreams. They are statements of faith, and we need that faith now more than ever. Our Unitarian Universalist tradition is the merger of two traditions. On the Unitarian side, we were brought the idea that God is one. Unitarian, it speaks to unity of our world and of existence. Our Universalist side, that preached universal salvation, brought us the idea that God is love. It speaks to the creative power of an open heart. While some of us today will understand these ideas metaphorically and others more concretely, we are left with a faith in what is possible. One love, one world, one humanity. In that oneness, what are we to do with the gunmen? In that oneness, what are we to do with the voices of hatred that inexplicably rise at times like these? I want to make them evil. I want to make them other, but I cannot. One love, one world, one humanity. Those whose words and actions hurt my heart are part of the fabric of humanity. I cannot make them other. I am compelled to try to understand them as a broken and wounded part of who we are. I was asked by a reporter in the days after Pulse if I was angry. I said I was sad, deeply, deeply sad. What about my people? He asked. Are they angry? I said that I thought they were mostly angry at the hateful rhetoric that had risen in the wake of the shooting. 6 years later, answers about the shooter and his motives still elude us. I hold the shooter responsible for his choices. I also see a larger environment that made those choices possible, maybe even likely. As a larger culture, we need to search our hearts and continue to act and speak in ways that counter those forces. We need to stand against words and ideologies that create an environment of hate and violence. We need to advocate for mental health care for all. We need to work for responsible gun ownership that keeps all guns out of the hands of some people and some guns out of the hands of all people. In our interconnected world, individuals exist within culture, a culture that helps create them. And while that can be depressing, it is also where our hope lies. One love, one world, one humanity. Can we commit ourselves to transforming our world away from hatred, away from violence, and toward love, compassion, and care? We do this in many ways, but all of them involve deeper, more authentic relationship. All of them involve communities that nurture real connection and celebrate the full humanity of each person. For this morning, let me name 3 things that I see that will help us as we move forward. First, we need to continue to support those who are still healing and hurting from the tragedies we have already seen. In Orlando, this includes those closest to the 49, the survivors, and the first responders, of course. Other cities and towns, sadly, have their own lists. But it's also many more people who need support, people who sometimes think they don't have a right to need healing because they weren't directly impacted. When Unitarian Universalists from around the country contacted us after Pulse to know where they could donate, We said, donate to your local LGBTQ center. They will need your support as they support the vicarious trauma that has occurred. Look especially for centers that serve the Latinx community. Our whole community was traumatized. It's okay to get help. Now I know that this is true every time one of these events happen. Now I understand better the impact is broader than I had ever understood. Now I also know that there are abundant ways for us to support each other, both physical and emotional. The second thing we can do is to continue to reach out across difference. Many Unitarian Universalist congregations are good at finding those kinds of opportunities. I encourage you to continue to engage those kinds of meaningful activities. I've seen all kinds of things done by our congregations. I've seen congregations attend or even co-host an iftar, the breaking of the daily Ramadan fast in the Muslim tradition. I've seen congregations host interfaith events on language in the way that it can inspire peace or provoke hate, or partner with existing groups that bring people together across diverse demographics. And the thing is, you don't have to do this alone, right? There are others in the region doing these things. You don't have to create it from scratch. Look for others doing good work and join them. So we need to continue to support those still healing. We need to reach out across difference. Lastly, related to this, we need to take advantage of opportunities to deepen our cultural competency. We need to understand those who are different from us in all sorts of ways. We need to understand more fully. We need to know how to move into new spaces and new experience in ways that help and don't hurt. We need to recognize that in spite of our best intentions, we may still make mistakes. We will still make mistakes. And yet we must be brave enough to continue to reach out, knowing that when we make those mistakes, we can also make amends as necessary. The continuing development of our intercultural competency is a lifelong project. It is a lifelong project. You never get the check mark that says that you're done. And we have to do it anyway. It is crucial. It is crucial to the world of which we dream. These actions, continuing to heal, reaching out and learning more, can provide us critical tools as we move forward. These steps can help us, all of us, to bring more blessings to our world. When we see the worst that humanity has to offer, we are called to respond with the very best that humanity has to offer. Love and hope, acceptance and affirmation, bravery and commitment. I know we are tired, we are worn. There will be times when you need to step back and care for yourself. Recharge your compassion. It can be tempting to disconnect, but be careful. Take a break if you need to, but don't be broken. Do not sever your ties to community. Don't allow your relationships to be injured or dismissed. We will each tend to our wounds in different ways. We will each process at different speeds. Let that be the first point of difference that we honor. Today, you may be ready to talk and to talk and to talk, and I may need silence. May we respect each other's journeys. And then as time goes on, let us reach out to each other with more and deeper understanding. We will make real change in the world by creating authentic relationships across difference, of course, but also with those closest to us. We can find our common ground while at the same time celebrating the beauty and wonder of our diversity. So what can you do? What can you do? So much. And it all starts with an open heart. An open heart that lets others in and refuses to other anyone. An open heart that lets your love shine out, your full humanity, all and every bit of who you are. What the world needs now is you. So let your light shine. Our hymn is Fire of Truth. Once more. So what can you do? So much. And it all starts with an open heart. An open heart that lets others in and refuses to other anyone. An open heart that lets your love shine out. Your full humanity, all and every bit of who you are. What the world needs now is you. So let your light shine.
Thank you, Kathy. Before I extinguish the chalice, I want to really thank Kathy for everything she's done for us. When we started Zoom a couple years ago, first, we just didn't have church. We closed the church. And when we started to get to the point where we could have a Zoom service, Kathy helped us. And we were a mess. I don't know if the rest of the rep committee is here today, but those of you that were there got scolded. Because we didn't have an order of service prepared. We were all talking at once. We were flipping through our books, looking for hymns. And finally, Kathy said, wait a minute. Let's get organized. And she helped us organize. And first thing we do now when we have a Zoom speaker or any speaker is to get that order of service up on the screen so we're all on the same page. And we thank you for the scolding. And we thank you for the love because you have been such a part of us for the last couple of years. We'll miss you. We wish you well on your sabbatical and your travels. And thank you, Charlie, for sharing her all this time.
And could I have somebody help me out? This is just a tiny token of our appreciation.
Thank you for being here today. Please exit starting with the back rows and ask permission from someone you're talking to before you remove your mask. Thanks for being here.